Horror is all about surprise, and these moments, including an accidental electrocution, a cannibal's connection to a bloodsucker, and a creepy inside joke, surprised everyone. At the conclusion of the classic 1996 slasher Scream, we finally learn who's behind the mask of the ghost-faced killer that's been terrorizing the local teens of Woodsboro. It turns out there wasn't just one knife-wielding maniac, but two. Billy, the bad boy boyfriend of heroine Sydney, and agent of chaos Stu. Unlike Billy, Stu doesn't have a personal vendetta or a tragic dark past. So when this deadly duo enact the final step of their plan by stabbing each other to make it appear as though Sydney's dad attacked them, Stu doesn't exactly take it very well. He babbles and hurls obscenities with the shock of a child who has just learned what consequences are. Amidst the chaos, Sydney slips away, calls the cops, and proceeds to antagonize her assailants over the phone. A frustrated Billy then throws the phone across the room and it hits Stu in the head.
Hit me with the phone!
Screenwriter Kevin Williamson revealed on the movie's Blu-ray commentary that Matthew Lillard improvised a huge chunk of his lines, including the one in response to being hit with the phone. In fact, this whole moment was unplanned, as Skeet Ulrich was supposed to throw the phone at the kitchen counter, but it slipped out of his hands that were covered in fake blood. So when he accidentally hit his co-star instead, Lillard promptly retorted in character. When aspiring FBI agent Clarice Starling pays a visit to imprisoned serial killer Hannibal Lecter, she learns the truth about him via a vivid anecdote from the man himself about his encounter with the senseless taker.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Anthony Hopkins' delivery as Lecter is inhumane and terrifyingly visceral. It's a perfectly creepy thing for a madman like Hannibal and a disturbing demonstration of vulgarity. The slurping noise that he makes wasn't actually in the Silence of the Lambs screenplay, but was instead something the actor added in at the last minute. In a 2016 interview with Radio Times, he revealed, "I don't know why, but I've always known what scares people. When I was a kid, I'd tell the girls around the streets the story about Dracula." He then reproduced Lecter's legendary hiss and added that they'd run screaming away. Jack Nicholson's performance as a writer losing his mind in 1980's The Shining is filled with plenty of unforgettable moments. There are the quiet opening scenes when his strange smile belies his simmering insanity. Then there are the sequences when the Overlook Hotel begins to seduce and increasingly boost up Jack Torrance, thereby alienating him from reality itself. And then there's, of course, the film's final act, when he tears through anyone foolish enough to wind up on the pointy end of his axe. And the latter features one particularly memorable improvised moment. While Jack's wife Wendy cowers in the bathroom, he hacks away at the feeble door with reckless abandon. After creating a suitable crack, he peers through the porthole and maniacally proclaims,
Here's Johnny!
That line doesn't appear in either Stephen King's novel or the film's screenplay, as it was instead ad-libbed by Nicholson. Maybe director Stanley Kubrick's infamously exhaustive takes drove Nicholson over the deep end. Or maybe he's just a really big fan of late-night host Johnny Carson. Either way, it's a terrifying moment. Just imagine you're out on a shark hunt, and when you least expect it, your prey emerges from the ocean's depths, summoned by all that delicious chum you've been dumping into the water. How would you respond? Before this moment happens in 1975's Jaws, Police Chief Martin Brody has seen the shark before, but only in mere glimpses. But now with the beast just feet from his face, he has a real sense of what he and his men are up against.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
As Jaws screenwriter Cole Gottlieb recalled to The Hollywood Reporter in 2016, Brody's famous utterance wasn't a scripted line, so much as it was an in-joke among the filmmakers. The movie's shoot suffered from numerous difficulties, like producers refusing to spend money on a bigger support boat to steady the barge carrying all of the equipment. As Gottlieb explained, it became a catchphrase for any time anything went wrong. If lunch was late or the swells were rocking the camera, someone would say, "You're gonna need a bigger boat." So Roy Scheider ad-libbed the line at various points throughout the shoot to try to get this inside gag into the final cut. His persistence ultimately paid off in the scene when Brody gets up close and personal with the Great White. As Gottlieb remembered, it was so appropriate and so real, and it came at the right moment. The chestburster scene in the 1979 sci-fi horror classic Alien is an absolute nightmare. While the crew of the Nostromo enjoys a pleasant group breakfast, It's clear that something terrible is about to happen. Sure, Executive Officer Kane says he feels great, but he recently had an alien horseshoe crab glued to his face. So it's hardly surprising that the incubating baby alien cracks its way through his fragile human ribs and rips its way through his guts. Then it flashes its pearly whites before zipping off into the air ducts to fully mature into the monstrous killer that will make the crew members' lives a living hell. But what really sells this scene are the crew's reactions. They look genuinely horrified, and that's because they were. John Hurt was the only actor who knew what was going to happen, mainly because he was outfitted with a prosthetic chest for the real animal organs and a compressed blood machine. But the rest of the cast was ushered off set while Hurt was strapped in so that they could be kept totally in the dark. When they leaned in close over Hurt's fake torso, they got an unexpected face full of explosive viscera. Sometimes to make horror movie history, you have to break a few ribs. Most of the entries on this list feature human ingenuity, but this one is more about human error. As revealed in the making-of documentary Never Sleep Again: The Elm Street Legacy, the scene in 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street in which a snoozing Glenn Lance is sucked through his bed didn't exactly go as planned. If you've seen it, you surely remember the geyser of blood that emerges from the bed after Glenn gets sucked in, and then gravity basically stops working as the blood begins to slosh from wall to wall like a crimson tide, perfectly capturing the nightmare logic at play with Freddy Krueger. But filming the scene was a nightmare into itself. It was shot in a rotating room that was flipped upside down. The mission was simple: pour fake blood into a hole and film it. The first problem was that the red liquid was poured onto a lamp, which electrocuted a crew member. On top of that, the now electrified blood caused the room to roll all the way over. Fortunately though, nobody was seriously injured, and the filmmakers were left with a trippier sequence than they'd expected.
No one was hurt. We got the shot.
Possessed preteen Reagan McNeil goes through hell over the course of the 1973 classic, The Exorcist. And the most hellish moment is probably when she projectile vomits split pea soup onto Father Karras. Naturally enough, he reacts by gasping for breath and looking appropriately disgusted. But if you look really closely, you can also detect a hint of uncharacteristic anger on the usually even-tempered priest. This is because Jason Miller, the actor who played him, wasn't clued into what exactly was going to happen. In the BBC documentary The Fear of God, 25 Years of The Exorcist, the movie's head of special effects revealed that he was all set up to have the vomit hit Miller in the chest, as scripted and rehearsed. But delays in setting up the scene led to the vomit getting cold, so the trajectory of the rig was changed and tilted it up towards Miller's face, and his unscripted reaction made it into the final cut. 1996's From Dusk Till Dawn is what you get when you throw vampires, westerns, and siege thrillers all together in a blender. One scene finds two bad brothers, played by George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino, in a lavish watering hole called the Titty Twister, awaiting the arrival of a partner in crime. Soon after the duo arrive, a stripper by the name of Santanico Pandemonium performs a snake dance striptease routine. This is before the brothers discover that this bar in the middle of nowhere is also an ancient Aztec haunt for a coven of bloodsuckers. So at least the dance is an enjoyable perk to their supposedly calm rendezvous. Santanico was an early role for Salma Hayek. In a 2017 interview with Yahoo, she admitted that she has very few memories of filming the striptease scene because, as she put it, I had to go on trance to do the dance. This was all a matter of the actress overcoming her fear of snakes. As she further explained, there was no choreography, it was improvised, because you can't choreograph a snake. We don't know what she's going to do.
Kneel and worship at the feet of Santanico Pandemonium!
The Blair Witch Project wasn't the first found-footage horror film, but it's almost surely the most influential. Filmed on commercially available camera equipment, a big part of what makes Blair Witch so scary is its commitment to realism. It really feels like we've stumbled across tapes recording an ill-fated documentary crew. And a big part of how directors Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick captured that realistic vibe was by having almost the entire film be improvised. As relayed in an oral history for Vice celebrating Blair Witch's 20th anniversary, the film's cast of 3 inexperienced, non-union actors was set loose in the Maryland wilderness to basically fend for themselves. They only had one hazy sense of anything resembling a plan. Every night at the campsite, each actor would be given a film canister and a milk crate with top-secret instructions that they weren't allowed to share with each other. For instance, when Joshua Leonard mysteriously vanished in the middle of the night, his castmates had no idea that was going to happen. As the actors tell it, they would have been genuinely terrified if they weren't so damp, cold, and exhausted from actually camping while making a film. A 1978 remake of a 50s B-movie, the Philip Kaufman-directed Invasion of the Body Snatchers spins a terrifying yarn about spores from outer space that quietly spread carbon copies of human beings to take over the world. In the film's final moments, it appears that Donald Sutherland's Matthew has somehow managed to evade the swarm of alien clones, which is weird because it seems like he'd been cornered. But now, here he is, going peacefully about his day. Maybe he's found a way to fly under the radar and trick the aliens. That's what Veronica Cartwright's Nancy hopes anyway, when she sees her old friend. But then Matthew's jaw spills open and his eyes peeled wide, as he screams with the signature accusatory shriek of an alien clone. Nancy is aghast, as are the rest of us. And so was Cartwright, as it turns out. As Kaufman explained to The Hollywood Reporter in 2018, while Sutherland was clued into this dire version for the film's ending, Cartwright was left in the dark. As the director explained, "I don't remember that we even told Veronica until Donald turned and did that shriek." Kaufman's desire was to make an ending that would be truly horrific, which is why he didn't share it with anyone, not even the studio executives. The result was ultimately quite uncanny, as Cartwright looks genuinely shocked and terrified. That's perfectly understandable though, because if you were suddenly faced with a shrieking Donald Sutherland, you might be pretty terrified too.